My husband said his mistress was more important than our kids. I made him prove it. I'd been married to Lance for 12 years and we had 2 kids, aged 10 and 7. Everything was normal until he started working late every Thursday. Said his company had these new weekly strategy meetings that went until midnight. I didn't question it because he'd always been ambitious about getting promoted. He'd come home smelling like cologne instead of his usual coffee smell, but I figured he was trying to impress the bosses. Then our daughter, Mia, mentioned that Daddy had picked up a lady from their school during pickup time last week. She was Mrs. Rivera, the new art teacher who just transferred from another district. Mia said Daddy gave her a ride and they were laughing a lot. When I asked Lance about it, he said her car broke down and he was being helpful. Made me feel crazy for even bringing it up. The Thursday meetings continued for 3 months. Then Lance started having Saturday golf trips with clients, Sunday brunches with investors. Our son Jake asked why Daddy never came to his soccer games anymore. Lance said making money for the family was more important than watching kids run around. That stung, but I let it go. One Thursday, I decided to surprise Lance at his office with dinner since he'd be stuck in meetings. The security guard said Lance left at 5 like always. No meetings on Thursdays. Never had been. I drove around for an hour trying to process this, then went to Mrs. Rivera's apartment complex because something in my gut just knew. His car was in her guest spot. I sat there for 3 hours until he came out. When he got home, I confronted him. He didn't even deny it. He actually said I should be grateful he found Gloria because she made him happy, which made him a better father. He said when he's happy, everyone benefits. I asked how long it had been going on. He said 6 months, since her welcome party at the school where I had introduced them. The next morning, Lance told the kids he had a special friend who made him smile and they'd be meeting her soon. Jake asked if she was why Daddy missed his games. Lance said Gloria was very important to him, and they'd understand when they're older. Mia started crying. Lance told her to stop being selfish. That weekend, he brought Gloria to Jake's soccer game, introduced her to other parents as his colleague while I was standing right there. She wore this tight dress to a kid's soccer game and kept touching Lance's arm. When Jake scored a goal, he looked at the stands and saw his dad kissing Gloria instead of watching. Jake just stood there on the field, confused. Lance missed it completely. The next week, Lance announced Gloria would be joining us for family dinner every Friday. He said the kids needed to get comfortable with her since she'd be around permanently. When I said absolutely not, he said I didn't get a vote because Gloria made him feel alive, and the kids needed to see what real love looked like. He actually said our marriage was a good example of settling, and Gloria was an example of passion. At the first dinner, Gloria sat in my spot. When Mia said that was Mommy's chair, Gloria said sometimes change is good for everyone. Lance agreed and told Mia to be respectful. Gloria spent dinner talking about her travels and her art while the kids picked at their food. She asked them to call her Glow. Jake said he'd rather not call her anything. Lance sent him to his room without dessert. Gloria started coming over more. She'd redecorate things, saying the house needed more sophistication. She threw out the kids' artwork from the fridge because it was cluttered. She told Mia her drawings were amateur and she could teach her real technique. When Mia said she liked her drawings the way they were, Gloria told Lance I was raising rude children. Lance made Mia apologize. Then came Jake's birthday. I'd planned a party at the trampoline park with his whole class. The morning of, Lance said Gloria thought it was too chaotic, and they'd arranged something better. They took the kids to an art museum instead. Jake spent his 10th birthday looking at paintings he didn't understand while Gloria lectured about brushstrokes. His friends went to the trampoline park without him. He cried himself to sleep. That's when Lance said it. I confronted him about ruining Jake's birthday, and he said Gloria's cultural enrichment was more important than some loud party. I said the kids' happiness should come first. He looked me straight in the eye and said Gloria was more important than the kids, because she made him the man who could provide for them. Without her, he'd be miserable and no good to anyone. He said the kids would thank him one day. I knew then exactly what I had to do. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. I spent that night at the kitchen table with an old notebook, writing down everything I could remember. Jake's soccer games where Lance never showed up, starting from the first one he missed back in March. Mia's art show at the school where she kept looking at the door, waiting for her dad who never came. The time Gloria threw out Jake's drawing from the fridge and Mia cried for an hour. Every cruel comment Gloria made about my kids' artwork being amateur. Every moment Lance chose Gloria over them, told them to be respectful to her, sent them to their rooms for defending themselves. My hand shook while I wrote, anger making the pen press so hard into the paper that some words tore through. I filled 12 pages with dates, times, exact words Lance said. The worst one went on its own page in capital letters. Gloria is more important than the kids because she makes me the man who can provide for them. Written 3 times so I wouldn't forget how he looked at me when he said it. The next morning, I woke up at 5, couldn't sleep anymore. Lance was still asleep, snoring like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't destroyed our family. I waited until I heard the shower running, then went to his home office. The file cabinet wasn't even locked. I pulled out bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, his work calendar that showed no Thursday meetings ever scheduled. My phone camera clicked over and over, hands steadier now that I had a plan. I photographed everything, sent it all to a new email address I'd made on my phone at 4 a.m. Evidence he couldn't delete, couldn't explain away, couldn't make me feel crazy about. The work schedule was the best part, printed from his company portal with the official logo, showing he left at 5 every Thursday for the past 6 months. No meetings, just lies. At 6, I called Gwyneth, my best friend since college. She answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. I asked if the kids and I could stay with her for a few days while I figured things out. She didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, just told me to pack bags and come over right now. That made me cry, standing in my kitchen at 6 a.m, because someone actually cared about protecting my kids. I packed 3 bags fast, throwing in clothes and toothbrushes and the kids' favorite stuffed animals, Mia's art supplies, Jake's soccer ball, things that would make them feel safe. Lance came downstairs at 7:30, hair still wet, checking his phone before he even looked at me. I told him calmly that the kids and I were spending the weekend at Gwyneth's house because we needed space. He barely glanced up, thumbs moving across his screen. He said that was fine because he had plans with Gloria anyway, like I'd just told him we were going to the grocery store instead of leaving him. He walked out the door without asking why we needed space, without asking if the kids were okay, without looking at me at all. At Gwyneth's house, I set the kids up with movies in her living room, cartoons they liked that made them laugh. They seemed happy to be somewhere different, somewhere Gloria wasn't. I sat at Gwyneth's kitchen table with my laptop and searched divorce attorneys. Read reviews for 2 hours, compared rates, made notes about which ones specialized in custody cases. 5 lawyers made my list, all women, all with reviews mentioning they were tough in court. One review said Jillian Rowe had helped a mother prove parental alienation and won primary custody. I highlighted that name 3 times. Monday morning, I dropped the kids at the school, hugged them extra long, promised I'd pick them up early. Then I drove to Jillian Rowe's office downtown, a small building with her name on a brass plate outside. The receptionist led me to a conference room with a big window. Jillian walked in 5 minutes later, tall with gray hair and sharp eyes that looked right through me. She sat down and told me to start from the beginning. I talked for 40 minutes straight, telling her everything while she took notes in neat handwriting. When I finished, she put her pen down, looked me straight in the eye and said, "We can protect your children." Those exact words. I almost cried again. Jillian explained that Lance's own words about Gloria being more important than his kids would destroy him in custody court. She said judges hate parents who put their affairs above their children, especially when there's proof of the mistress being cruel to the kids. She told me we needed to be smart and careful, gathering more evidence while acting like I was trying to work things out. Judges like parents who try to fix their marriages, she said, even when the marriage is obviously over. We had to play the game right. I hired her right there, wrote a check from my personal savings account that Lance didn't know about. Money I'd been saving from my part-time job at the library, just a few $100s a month for years. We made a plan together at that conference table. Document everything that happened from now on. Get the kids into therapy so a professional could see the damage and write reports for court. Wait for Lance to keep choosing Gloria over the kids, because he would. Jillian said that last part with complete certainty, like she'd seen 100 men just like Lance. She probably had. That afternoon, I picked up the kids from the school at 2 instead of 3, told them we were getting ice cream. We sat at a table outside the ice cream shop, them with chocolate cones, me with nothing because my stomach was too tight. I explained gently that Mommy and Daddy were having big problems, and we might not all live together soon. Mia asked if it was because of Gloria. I said yes. She looked relieved instead of sad, her whole face relaxing like I'd told her good news. That broke my heart worse than anything Lance had done, seeing my 10-year-old daughter relieved that her family was ending. Jake asked if he'd still have to see Gloria if we didn't live with Daddy anymore. His voice was small and scared, ice cream dripping down his hand. I promised him I would do everything in my power to protect both of them from her. He put his cone down and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, his small arms around my neck, holding on like I might disappear. I hugged him back and realized my kids had been waiting for me to do something, to protect them, to choose them over keeping the peace. They'd been waiting for months while I tried to make it work, and I'd let them down by waiting so long. I went online that night after the ice cream, after the kids were finally asleep, and searched for family therapists who worked with children going through divorce. I needed someone who understood what my kids were dealing with, someone who could help them and also document what was happening for court. I read through websites for over an hour, looking at credentials and reviews, trying to find the right person. One name kept coming up in positive reviews, Curtis Walker, a therapist who specialized in helping kids process parental affairs and family breakdown. The reviews said he was gentle with children but thorough in his documentation, which was exactly what I needed. I called his office first thing the next morning, before the kids woke up and got his receptionist. I explained that I had 2 children, 10 and 7, who were dealing with their father's affair and the mistress being cruel to them. I told her I needed someone who could help the kids, but also provide documentation for custody proceedings. She was quiet for a moment, then said Curtis had openings later that week and would be happy to help. She scheduled Mia for Wednesday afternoon and Jake for Thursday, back-to-back appointments so I wouldn't have to make multiple trips. I thanked her and hung up, feeling like I'd taken another step toward protecting my kids. That same morning, Jillian called me. She said staying at my friend's house looked like I was abandoning the marital home, which could hurt my custody case. Judges didn't like it when one parent left the house with the kids because it looked like you were trying to keep them from the other parent, even if that parent didn't care. She told me to move back home immediately and document everything that happened there instead. I didn't want to go back, didn't want to see Lance or have the kids around Gloria again, but I understood the strategy. We packed up our things at Gwyneth's house that afternoon and I drove us home. Lance's car was in the driveway when we pulled up, which surprised me because it was only 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I got the kids inside and started unpacking our bags while they went to their rooms. Lance came downstairs around 5, glanced at us like he'd barely noticed we'd been gone and went to the kitchen to make coffee. He didn't ask where we'd been or if the kids were okay. He just made his coffee and went back upstairs to his office. That night, around 6, the doorbell rang. I answered it and Gloria walked in without waiting for an invitation, carrying a bag of takeout food. Lance came down and kissed her right in front of me and the kids, then announced they'd brought dinner for everyone. I pulled out my phone and took time-stamped photos of her in our house, of Lance kissing her in our entryway, of the 2 of them setting up dinner like they owned the place. I made sure the timestamps were clear and sent them to Jillian immediately. Dinner was worse than I expected. Gloria sat at the table and immediately started watching how Mia ate, making little faces every time my daughter took a bite. Halfway through the meal, Gloria put down her fork and looked at Mia with this fake concerned expression. She said Mia needed to work on her table manners, that the way she held her fork was wrong and she chewed too loudly. She actually said my 10-year-old daughter needed etiquette lessons, like Mia was some kind of project that needed fixing. Lance jumped in immediately, agreeing with everything Gloria said, nodding along like she was making perfect sense. He told Mia that Gloria was just trying to help her become more sophisticated, that she should be grateful for the attention. I watched my daughter's face crumble, saw her eyes fill with tears that she was trying so hard not to let fall. Mia put her fork down and stared at her plate, not eating anymore, just sitting there trying not to cry. I smiled politely at Gloria, said something neutral about how every family has different styles, and made mental notes of every single word for Jillian. I noted the time, what was said exactly, how Lance backed Gloria up without hesitation, and how Mia reacted. I would write it all down the second the kids went to bed. After dinner, I got the kids ready for bed, reading to Jake and tucking in Mia, making sure they felt safe even though I knew they didn't. Once their doors were closed and I heard their breathing settle into sleep, I went back downstairs. Lance was on the couch watching TV with Gloria curled up next to him. I stood in the doorway and told him clearly that Gloria was not welcome in our home anymore until we'd worked through our marriage problems. I kept my voice calm and reasonable, exactly like Jillian had told me to do. Lance looked at me and laughed. Actually laughed like I'd told a joke. He said there was nothing to work through because he was happy with Gloria, and I needed to accept that she was part of our lives now. He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather, like our marriage and our kids meant nothing. Gloria smirked at me from the couch and Lance put his arm around her. I had my phone in my pocket, recording everything, the microphone pointed toward them. I let him talk, let him say everything about how Gloria made him happy, and I just needed to get over it and accept the new reality. I recorded every word, then excused myself and went upstairs to email the audio file to Jillian before I went to bed. The next day, I drove to Jillian's office with the recording on my phone. I sat in her conference room and played it for her, watching her face as she listened to Lance dismiss our marriage and tell me to accept his mistress. When it finished, Jillian smiled. Not a happy smile, but a satisfied one. She said Lance was making our case for us by being so obvious about his priorities, so blatant about choosing Gloria over everything else. She told me to let him keep going, keep bringing Gloria around, keep saying these things because every word and every action was evidence. She said we should let him continue while we quietly built our case, gathering everything we needed to show a judge exactly who Lance had become. I felt relieved and angry at the same time. Relieved that we were building a strong case, but angry that I had to document my husband destroying our family. Jillian told me the therapy appointments with Curtis were perfect timing, that having a professional assess the kids would be powerful evidence of the damage Lance was causing. Wednesday afternoon, I picked Mia up from the school early and drove her to Curtis Walker's office. The building was small and quiet, with a waiting room that had kids' books and toys. Curtis came out to meet us, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a calm voice. He shook Mia's hand and told her they were just going to talk and maybe draw some pictures. Nothing scary or hard. I waited in the lobby while they went into his office, checking my phone and trying not to worry. After 45 minutes, Curtis brought Mia back out. She looked tired but okay, not upset. Curtis asked if he could speak with me privately for a moment, and I followed him back to his office while Mia waited with the receptionist. He told me the session went well, that Mia had opened up about feeling replaced by Gloria, and how her daddy didn't pay attention to her anymore. He said she talked about how Gloria threw away her artwork and criticized everything she did, and how Lance always took Gloria's side. Curtis said the emotional neglect was clear and concerning, and he would be documenting everything carefully for potential court involvement. He asked me to bring Jake tomorrow and said he'd start building a complete picture of what these kids were going through. Thursday, I brought Jake to the same office. He was more nervous than Mia had been, asking me if he had to talk about Daddy and Gloria. I told him he could talk about whatever he wanted, that Curtis was there to help him feel better. Jake went into the office holding Curtis's hand, looking small and scared. This session was longer, almost an hour, and when they came out, Jake looked exhausted. Curtis asked to speak with me again, and this time his face was more serious. He said Jake's session was harder because Jake didn't have the words for his feelings yet, being only 7. But Jake had drawn a picture during their time together, and Curtis showed it to me. The drawing showed our family, but Lance and Gloria were on one side holding hands, and the 3 of us were on the other side, with a thick black line separating the 2 groups. Jake had drawn the line over and over, making it dark and heavy, creating a wall between his father and the rest of us. Curtis said the drawing spoke volumes about how Jake understood the family split, how he saw his father choosing Gloria over him and his sister and me. He said he'd keep the drawing for his files and continue documenting both children's progress and distress. I started keeping a detailed journal of every single interaction after that. When Lance missed Jake's soccer practice on Saturday because he was taking Gloria to dinner downtown, I wrote it down with the date and time. When Lance told Mia he couldn't attend her school art show because it was the same night as Gloria's gallery opening and obviously Gloria's event was more important, I documented his exact words and Mia's reaction. When Lance promised to take the kids to the park on Sunday, but spent the day with Gloria instead, leaving them sitting by the door waiting for him until I finally told them he wasn't coming, I wrote down every detail. I took photos of the kids' disappointed faces, of text messages from Lance canceling plans, of times he said he'd be home but showed up 6 hours late smelling like Gloria's perfume. I created a file on my computer with everything organized by date, every broken promise and every choice he made that hurt our children. Jillian told me this documentation would be powerful in court, showing a pattern of neglect and broken trust that no judge could ignore. 2 weeks into therapy, Curtis called me to his office without the kids. He sat me down and told me both children were showing clear signs of emotional distress directly related to their father's behavior and Gloria's presence in their lives. He said Mia was developing anxiety about going home, worried about what Gloria might criticize or throw away next. Jake was having trouble sleeping and had started acting out at the school, getting into fights with other kids when he never had before. Curtis said the damage was real and measurable, and it was getting worse the longer they stayed in that environment. He offered to write a professional assessment for custody proceedings, a detailed report about what he was seeing and how Lance's choices were harming his children. I accepted immediately, thanking him for being willing to help us. He said he'd have the assessment ready within a week, and it would clearly state that the children needed to be removed from the situation for their mental health and well-being. That weekend, Lance made his big announcement. He came home Friday night with Gloria and gathered us all in the living room like he had important news to share. He said Gloria's lease was ending next month and it didn't make sense for her to get a new place when she was at our house all the time anyway. He said she was moving in with us, moving into our home permanently, and we all needed to accept it. I felt my stomach drop, felt rage build up in my chest. I told him absolutely not, that Gloria was not moving into our house where our children lived. Lance looked at me with this cold expression and said I didn't get to control his life anymore, that this was his house too, and he could have whoever he wanted living here. Gloria smiled at me from behind him, and I knew she'd been planning this, pushing for this, wanting to take over our home completely. I didn't argue anymore that night because I knew it wouldn't matter. Instead, I went upstairs and called Jillian, telling her what Lance had just announced. She said this was actually good for our case because it showed Lance prioritizing his mistress over his children's emotional well-being in their own home, and we should let him proceed while we prepared to file for divorce and emergency custody. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jillian's number with shaking hands. She answers on the second ring, and I tell her what Lance just announced about Gloria moving in. There's a pause. Then she says, "This is actually perfect for our case." She explains that Lance moving his mistress into the family home while the kids are living there shows he's putting his relationship before their emotional well-being. She tells me to send her an email tonight documenting my objection to Gloria moving in, making it clear I told Lance no and he's doing it anyway. Then she says we let him proceed with this terrible decision while we file for divorce and emergency custody. Her voice is calm and strategic, like she's seen this pattern 100 times before. I thank her and hang up, feeling slightly less panicked now that I have a plan. That night after Lance goes to bed, I sit both kids down at the kitchen table. Mia clutches her stuffed rabbit and Jake keeps picking at a loose thread on his shirt. I tell them Daddy has decided Gloria is going to live with us starting next month. Mia's face crumples immediately, and Jake just stares at the table. I reach across and take both their hands, telling them Mommy is going to make some changes to keep them safe and happy. Mia looks up at me with tears streaming down her face and asks if we can leave instead, if we can go somewhere without Gloria. I squeeze her hand and promise that yes, very soon, we will have our own place where it's just the three of us. Jake asks if Gloria will throw away more of our stuff, and I tell him she won't get the chance because we're leaving before she can hurt them anymore. They both hug me tight, and I feel their relief mixed with fear, knowing I need to move fast. Saturday morning, I start looking at rental houses online while Lance is at the gym with Gloria. I search for places near the kids' school so they don't have to change districts and lose their friends. Most places are too expensive or too far away, but then I find a small 3-bedroom house just 4 blocks from their school. The rent is more than I'm paying now, but I can afford it if I pick up extra shifts at work. I call the landlord and arrange to see it that afternoon. The house is older and needs some work, but it has a backyard where Jake can practice soccer and a spare room Mia can use for her art. I fill out the application right there and put down a deposit using money from my savings account. The landlord says I can move in within the month, and I feel hope for the first time in weeks. Tuesday morning, Lance leaves for work early, and 3 hours later, Gloria shows up with suitcases and boxes. She doesn't knock, just uses the key Lance gave her and walks in like she owns the place. I watch from the kitchen as she takes over the guest room, hanging her clothes in the closet and putting her toiletries in the bathroom. Then she starts rearranging the living room furniture without asking anyone. She moves the couch to a different wall and shifts the coffee table to the center. She takes down the kids' artwork that was displayed on the walls, the drawings and paintings they were so proud of, and tosses them in a trash bag. In their place, she hangs her own pieces, abstract paintings with harsh colors that feel cold and unwelcoming. When Mia comes home from the school and sees her butterfly painting in the trash, she starts crying. Gloria tells her the house needs to look more mature now that she lives here, that children's artwork is fine for the refrigerator but not for display. I pull the drawings out of the trash after Gloria goes upstairs and hide them in my closet. Thursday afternoon, Jake comes home from the school with red eyes and tear tracks on his face. I ask what's wrong, and he tells me some kids were teasing him about his dad having a girlfriend. Apparently, their parents had been talking about seeing Lance and Gloria around town together, holding hands at restaurants and kissing in parking lots. The other kids called Jake's family weird and asked if his mom knew his dad had a new wife. Jake says he tried to ignore them, but they wouldn't stop, and he ended up pushing one of the boys during recess. I hug him close while he cries into my shoulder. When Lance gets home, I tell him what happened, and he barely looks up from his phone. He says kids are mean sometimes, and Jake needs to toughen up, that he can't let other people's opinions bother him. Jake starts crying harder and runs to his room. Lance shrugs and goes to find Gloria. I sit at my laptop that night and type out every detail of what happened to Jake. I write down the names of the kids who teased him, what they said, how Lance dismissed his pain. I describe Jake's tears and his fear of going back to the school. I email it all to Jillian with the subject line, reputational harm to children. She responds within an hour saying this is exactly what we need. Proof that Lance's public affair is damaging the kids' social lives and emotional health. She says she's ready to file divorce papers whenever I give the word. I tell her I need 1 more week to get the rental house ready, to move some things over gradually so Lance doesn't notice. She agrees and says to keep documenting everything until then. Saturday afternoon, Gloria announces she wants to give Mia an art lesson. She sets up supplies in the dining room and calls for Mia to come downstairs. Mia stays in her room with the door locked. Gloria knocks and says she's trying to help, that Mia has potential but needs proper instruction. Mia yells through the door that she doesn't want Gloria to teach her anything. Gloria's face turns red and she storms off to find Lance. 20 minutes later, Lance comes upstairs and tells Mia she's being disrespectful to someone who's trying to help her improve. Mia says she likes her art the way it is and doesn't want to change. Lance says she's grounded from her art supplies for a week, that she needs to learn gratitude and respect. Mia screams that she hates Gloria and slams her door. I stand in the hallway with my phone in my pocket, recording the whole conversation. After Lance leaves, I photograph Mia crying on her bed and the empty space where her art supplies used to be. Monday morning, I have an appointment with Curtis for both kids' therapy session. After he meets with them separately, he calls me into his office alone. His expression is serious as he tells me both children are showing major anxiety and depression related to the home situation. He says Mia is developing fear about going home because she worries what Gloria might criticize or throw away next. Jake is having trouble sleeping and started acting out at the school when he never had behavioral problems before. Curtis says the damage is real and getting worse the longer they stay in that environment. He offers to write a professional assessment for custody proceedings, a detailed report about what he's seeing, and how Lance's choices are harming his children. I accept immediately, and he says he'll have it ready within a week. He also says he's willing to testify in court if needed about the psychological harm they're experiencing. I start picking up every extra shift I can get at work, covering for other people and staying late whenever possible. At night after Lance falls asleep, Gwyneth comes over and helps me pack boxes. We work quietly, filling boxes with clothes and toys and kitchen items Lance won't notice missing. I take them to the rental house in small loads, setting up the kids' rooms first so they'll have familiar things waiting for them. Gwyneth keeps telling me how proud she is that I'm protecting my kids, that I'm doing the right thing even though it's scary. She helps me move my clothes and books, picture frames and dishes, all the personal items that make a house feel like home. Lance never notices the gradual emptying of our shared space because he's too busy with Gloria. Friday night, Gloria hosts a dinner party at our house for her art teacher friends. She sends out invitations and plans the menu without asking me. 6 people show up carrying wine bottles and acting like this is Gloria's home. She introduces Lance as her partner while I'm standing right there in my own kitchen. The guests look uncomfortable, glancing between Gloria and me with confused expressions. One woman asks how long Lance and I have been separated, and Gloria laughs, saying they're working on that part. I smile politely and serve appetizers, making mental notes about how Gloria is already acting like a wife in front of witnesses. I take photos of the party, of Gloria playing hostess in my home, of Lance with his arm around her while she shows off her artwork on my walls. Everything goes into the file for Jillian. One of Gloria's art teacher friends finds me in the kitchen while I'm refilling wine glasses. She touches my arm gently and leans in close. She tells me she's really sorry about what I'm going through. She says Gloria has always been selfish, even back in college when they roomed together. She mentions that Gloria went after her boyfriend once and didn't even feel bad about it afterward. She says she's not surprised Gloria would pursue a married man with kids because Gloria only thinks about what makes Gloria happy. I thank her quietly and ask if she'd be willing to share that information with my lawyer if needed. She nods and writes her phone number on a napkin, telling me to call anytime. She says someone needs to stand up for those kids because they deserve better. I fold the napkin carefully and put it in my pocket, adding it to my mental list of evidence for Jillian. 3 days later, I'm at home when Jake's soccer coach calls my cell phone. His voice sounds worried as he asks if I can come to the field right away. I drive there in 10 minutes, my stomach tight with fear about what happened. When I arrive, Jake is sitting on the bench with tears running down his face while the other kids practice drills. The coach pulls me aside and explains what happened. Jake saw his dad's car pull into the parking lot during warm-ups and got so excited he ran toward it. But Lance was just dropping Gloria off at the gym next door and didn't even look at the field. Jake stood there watching his dad drive away without acknowledging him. Then Jake broke down crying right there on the field and couldn't stop. The coach had to pull him out of practice because he was too upset to play. I sit next to Jake on the bench and put my arm around him. He buries his face in my shoulder and sobs. I explain to the coach quietly that we're going through a difficult divorce, and his father has been prioritizing other things over the kids. The coach nods with understanding and concern in his eyes. The coach walks with us to my car after Jake calms down enough to leave. He mentions that he's noticed big changes in Jake over the past few months. He says Jake used to be one of the most excited kids on the team, always first to practice and giving maximum effort. Now Jake barely participates and seems sad most of the time. He says Jake's performance has dropped significantly, and his enthusiasm for soccer has basically disappeared. The coach asks carefully if there's anything he can do to help. I tell him honestly that I'm building a custody case, and any documentation of how Lance's behavior has affected Jake would be helpful. The coach says he'll write a detailed statement about the changes he's observed in Jake's behavior and attitude. He mentions specific examples of Jake's declining performance and emotional state during practices and games. He says he'll email it to me by tomorrow because kids shouldn't have to go through this kind of pain. I thank him with tears in my eyes and drive Jake home. The next morning, I call Jillian's office and schedule an appointment for that afternoon. I spend 2 hours organizing everything into folders. Curtis's psychological assessments of both kids with detailed notes about their anxiety and depression. The coach's statement about Jake's declining performance and emotional breakdown. My documentation of every incident, every missed game, every cruel comment Gloria made. The recording of Lance saying Gloria is more important than the kids. Photos of Gloria throwing out the kids' artwork and taking over our home. Screenshots of texts and emails. The contact information for Gloria's friend who witnessed her selfish behavior for years. I put everything in a large envelope and drive to Jillian's office. She greets me in the conference room and I spread everything across the table. She picks up each piece of evidence carefully, reading through Curtis's assessments first. Her expression gets more serious as she reviews the coach's statement and listens to the recording. She looks at the photos of the kids' artwork in the trash and Gloria's dinner party at our house. She reads through my detailed timeline of events with dates and times. When she finishes reviewing everything, she sits back in her chair. Jillian tells me we have a really strong case for primary custody with limited visitation for Lance. She says the combination of professional assessments, witness statements, recorded admissions, and documented patterns of neglect creates a picture that family court judges take very seriously. She explains that Lance prioritizing his mistress over his children's emotional well-being, combined with Gloria's cruelty toward them, gives us solid grounds for requesting supervised visitation only. She says we can also request a restraining order keeping Gloria away from the children during any visitation time Lance does get. She starts drafting divorce papers right there while I wait, typing quickly on her laptop. She includes requests for full physical custody, child support based on Lance's real income, and specific provisions protecting the kids from Gloria's influence. She prints everything out and shows me each section, explaining what it means and why it matters. She says she'll file the papers this week and have Lance served. She tells me to prepare for him to react badly, but to stay calm and document everything he does. She reminds me that his behavior will only help our case. Friday morning arrives and Lance leaves for work at his usual time. I wait until his car disappears down the street before I start moving. I take the kids to the school like normal, hugging them both extra tight before they go inside. Then I drive back home and load the last boxes into my car. Gwyneth meets me at the house with her truck, and we work quickly, carrying out the remaining furniture and belongings. We take the kids' beds, their dressers, the kitchen table Lance never noticed was mine before we got married. We pack up all the personal items, family photos, anything that makes this house feel like ours. The rental house already has most of our stuff from the gradual moves over the past weeks. This is just the final load, the last pieces of our life here. I leave the divorce papers on the kitchen counter where Lance will see them immediately when he comes home. I write a short note on top that says we're done, and he can contact me only through Jillian. I take my phone to the carrier store and get a new number, giving the new contact information only to Jillian, the school, and a few trusted friends. I block Lance's number on my old phone before I cancel the service. Then I drive to the rental house and start unpacking. Jillian calls me less than an hour after Lance would have gotten home. She sounds calm, but I can hear the satisfaction in her voice. She says Lance called her office furious and yelling, demanding to know where his kids are. He apparently threatened to call the police and report me for kidnapping. Jillian told him calmly that his children are safe with their mother, who actually prioritizes their well-being over her romantic relationship. She informed him that he'll be served with official divorce papers and he can respond through his own attorney. She said he needs to communicate only through legal channels from now on. She tells me he hung up on her after shouting that I'll regret this. She says his reaction is perfect for our case because it shows his focus is on control and anger, not concern for his children. She reminds me not to respond to any attempts he makes to contact me directly. She says everything goes through her office now. I leave early to pick up the kids from the school, wanting to be there the moment they come out. When they see me waiting by the car, they run over with their backpacks bouncing. I drive them to our new house, taking the long way so they can see it's still in their same neighborhood near their school and friends. When we pull into the driveway, I tell them this is our new home. I unlock the front door and let them explore. Mia finds her room first and actually cries when she sees it. Happy tears this time. Her bed is set up exactly how she likes it with her favorite blankets and stuffed animals. Her art supplies are organized on shelves along one wall. Her drawings are hanging on a bulletin board, the ones Gloria threw away that I'd saved from the trash. She hugs me so tight I can barely breathe. Jake discovers his room next and immediately notices his soccer trophies on display and his posters on the walls. He asks if we can put his drawings back on the fridge now. I tell him absolutely, and we walk to the kitchen together. He tapes up 3 drawings he made at the school this week, standing back to admire them with a huge smile. That weekend, we stay in our pajamas until noon and watch movies on the couch. I make pancakes for breakfast, and we eat them while sitting on the floor because I haven't bought a coffee table yet. We play board games that have been packed away for months because Gloria said they were childish and cluttered the house. We order pizza for dinner and eat it straight from the box. There's no Gloria criticizing anything, no Lance ignoring them while texting his mistress. No tension or walking on eggshells or wondering what will get thrown away next. Just the 3 of us being comfortable and safe in our own space. The kids are noticeably calmer, their shoulders relaxed instead of hunched up near their ears. Mia laughs at something in the movie we're watching. Jake makes jokes during the board game and doesn't look sad when he talks about soccer. On Sunday afternoon, Jake actually laughs at something funny I said. A real, genuine laugh that comes from his belly. I realize I haven't heard him laugh like that in months, maybe since before Gloria entered our lives. Monday morning, Jillian calls to tell me Lance's attorney contacted her office. He demanded immediate visitation with his children. Jillian responded by sending our complete evidence package along with Curtis's professional recommendation that any visitation be supervised, and Gloria must be completely absent until the children stabilize emotionally. She included the psychological assessments, the coach's statement, the recording, the photos, everything that shows the damage Lance's choices caused. Lance's attorney went quiet after receiving the package. Jillian says he hasn't responded in 3 days now, which means he's reviewing the evidence and realizing how bad Lance's case looks. She expects him to come back with a much more reasonable proposal once he understands what we have. She says most attorneys recognize when their client has destroyed their own case and try to negotiate the best deal possible rather than go to trial. She tells me to be patient and let the evidence do its work. She sounds confident that we'll get the custody arrangement we want because Lance gave us everything we needed to protect our kids. Tuesday morning, I wake up to my phone buzzing with a text from a number I don't recognize at first. It's my old number, the one Lance still has. The message is from Gloria, and it's nasty. She calls me bitter and says the kids will get over it once they see how happy their dad is with her. She says I'm being selfish and the kids deserve to see what real love looks like. She actually writes that Lance is better off without me dragging him down. I screenshot the message immediately and forward it to Jillian with a note saying Gloria just gave us more evidence. Jillian responds within 10 minutes saying it's perfect proof of Gloria's lack of concern for the children's well-being. She says any decent adult would prioritize the kids' feelings, not send angry texts to their mother. She adds this to our evidence file. That afternoon, I take both kids to their therapy session with Curtis. He meets with them separately like always, Mia first and then Jake. After both sessions, Curtis asks to speak with me privately in his office. He tells me that both kids are already showing improvement after just 1 week away from the toxic environment. Mia is drawing again, creating pictures that show happiness instead of the dark scribbles she was making before. Jake is sleeping through the night without nightmares for the first time in months. Curtis says the change is remarkable given how short the time period is. He explains that removing them from the constant stress of Gloria's presence and Lance's rejection has allowed them to start healing. He's documenting everything in his notes for court purposes. He tells me I made the right choice getting them out when I did. Wednesday morning, the school principal calls and asks me to come in for a meeting. I drop the kids at their classes and head to the office, worried something is wrong. The principal notices the address change in the system and wants to make sure the kids are okay. I explain the situation briefly, keeping it professional. She nods like she's not surprised at all. Then she mentions that she's had concerns about Gloria's boundary issues at the school. Apparently, Gloria had been trying to insert herself into school events and parent communications inappropriately. The principal says Gloria would show up at pickup time even when it wasn't her day, trying to collect the kids. She'd attend parent meetings she wasn't invited to, acting like she had authority over students who weren't even in her class. Other teachers complained that Gloria was overstepping and making parents uncomfortable. The principal has been keeping notes because several families mentioned concerns. The principal offers to provide a statement about Gloria's inappropriate behavior at the school, and Lance's absence from the school activities and parent-teacher conferences. She pulls out a file that documents every missed conference Lance skipped, every event he didn't attend, every time Gloria caused problems. She says several teachers have noticed the children's distress over the past months and their improvement since the separation. She's willing to document all of it officially for court purposes. I thank her and immediately text Jillian about this new evidence. Jillian responds saying this is exactly what we need because it shows a pattern of Gloria's poor judgment and Lance's neglect from objective professional observers. Thursday afternoon, Jillian calls with news. Lance finally agreed to supervised visitation at a neutral location without Gloria present. Jillian says this shows he knows his case is weak because a father confident in his parenting wouldn't accept such restrictions. The first visit is scheduled for Saturday at a family visitation center, where a professional supervisor will observe his interaction with the kids and file reports. Jillian explains that these supervisors are trained to watch for concerning behaviors, and their reports carry weight in court. She tells me to prepare the kids but not to pressure them either way. If they don't want to go, that's their choice, and the supervisor will document their reluctance. Friday evening, I sit down with both kids after dinner to prepare them for seeing their dad. I explain that it will be just him without Gloria and they can leave if they feel uncomfortable. The supervisor is there to make sure everyone is safe and respected. Mia looks at her hands for a long time before saying she wants to go because she misses her dad even though he hurt her. My heart breaks hearing her say that, but I tell her it's okay to miss him, and it shows she has a good heart. Jake says he'll go if Mia goes because he doesn't want her to be alone with Dad. I tell them both how proud I am of their bravery and resilience. Saturday morning, I drive the kids to the visitation center, a plain building with a waiting room and several observation rooms. The supervisor greets us and explains the process to the kids in a kind voice. She takes them to the visitation room while I wait outside. 2 hours later, the supervisor brings them back out early. The kids look disappointed and tired. The supervisor asks to speak with me privately, and hands me a copy of her report. According to the report, Lance spent most of the time on his phone texting someone, presumably Gloria. When Jake tried to tell him about making the select soccer team, Lance interrupted to complain about the divorce and blame me for everything. He told the kids I was being unreasonable and keeping them from him on purpose. He said Gloria missed them and couldn't wait to see them again. The kids asked to leave after 30 minutes of the scheduled 2 hours. The supervisor noted that Lance showed no awareness of his children's emotional needs and seemed more focused on his own grievances. Monday morning, Jillian calls after receiving the supervisor's report. She's using it to argue for reduced visitation frequency until Lance can demonstrate appropriate parenting behavior. She filed a motion this morning requesting that visits be reduced to once monthly, instead of twice monthly, until Lance completes parenting classes and shows improvement. Lance's attorney pushed back but weakly, clearly aware that their client is sabotaging his own case with his behavior. Jillian sounds confident that the judge will agree with our position given the documented pattern of Lance's poor parenting and self-centered focus. Tuesday afternoon, Gwyneth calls me sounding excited. She heard through mutual friends that Lance's relationship with Gloria is already showing strain. Apparently, Gloria is upset that he has kids and custody issues cramping their lifestyle. She's been complaining to her friends that she didn't sign up for this drama, and Lance comes with too much baggage. The friend says Gloria seems ready to move on to someone less complicated, someone without children and an ex-wife. Gwyneth thinks Gloria might leave Lance soon, which would be poetic justice after everything he sacrificed for her. I try not to feel satisfied about this, but I can't help it. 2 months pass with the kids settling into our new routine and Lance having minimal supervised visits that continue to go poorly. Finally, the mediation session arrives. I meet Jillian at her office and we drive to the mediator's building together. Lance arrives 20 minutes late, which the mediator notes with obvious disapproval. He keeps checking his phone throughout the meeting, typing messages and barely paying attention. The mediator asks him to put the phone away, and he does, but keeps glancing at it. We sit across from each other with our attorneys on either side, and the mediator at the head of the table. The mediator reviews the custody proposal and asks if we're ready to discuss arrangements. Lance immediately jumps in, saying he wants more time with his kids. Jillian pulls out the folder I recognize from our preparation meetings and starts laying documents on the table. She doesn't rush, just places each piece of evidence carefully where the mediator can see it. The supervisor's reports from the visitation center go down first, then Curtis's psychological assessments of both kids, then the soccer coach's statement about Jake's declining performance and emotional state. She adds the principal's documentation about Gloria's inappropriate behavior at the school and Lance's absence from parent-teacher conferences and school events. Finally, she puts down my detailed records with dates and times and exact quotes, including the recording where Lance said Gloria was more important than our children. The mediator picks up each document and reads while Lance shifts in his chair and checks his phone again. His attorney leans over to look at the evidence, and I watch his expression change from confident to concerned. Jillian sits back down next to me and folds her hands on the table, not saying anything yet because the documents speak for themselves. Lance finally looks up from his phone and notices everyone staring at the papers spread across the table. He asks what all this is, and Jillian tells him it's the evidence of his behavior as a father over the past 6 months. The mediator finishes reading the last page and sets it down carefully, then looks directly at Lance with an expression I can't quite read, but definitely isn't friendly. She asks Lance if he'd like to respond to any of the documented incidents before they continue. He opens his mouth, but nothing comes out at first. Then he says the documents make things sound worse than they are. The mediator asks him to explain how telling his children that his mistress is more important than them could sound better in context. Lance's face goes red and he says that's not what he meant, that I must have recorded him wrong or taken it out of context. Jillian reaches into her bag and pulls out a small recorder, asking if he'd like to hear the actual audio. His attorney puts a hand on Lance's arm and shakes his head slightly, clearly telling him to stop talking. The mediator writes something on her notepad, and the sound of her pen scratching paper fills the quiet room. She looks up and addresses Lance directly, telling him that his behavior has been detrimental to his children based on the professional assessments and documented evidence. She asks him what he thinks is more important, his relationship with Gloria or his relationship with his kids. The room goes completely silent, and I can hear Lance breathing next to me across the table. He sits there frozen, and I watch him actually think about his answer like it's a difficult question. The pause stretches out for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15, and in that growing silence, everyone in the room understands exactly what his hesitation means. His own attorney looks away and shakes his head, clearly disgusted with his client. The mediator makes another note on her paperwork, and the scratching sound seems louder this time, more final. Jillian glances at me, and I see the smallest hint of satisfaction in her expression because we both know Lance just destroyed whatever chance he had. He finally says he loves his children, but Gloria makes him happy, and he can't just end that relationship. The mediator asks if he understands that his children's therapist has documented significant emotional distress directly caused by Gloria's presence in their lives. Lance says the kids will adjust once they get to know her better, that they're just being difficult because I've turned them against her. The mediator closes the folder in front of her with a firm snap that makes Lance jump slightly. She tells us she's reviewed all the evidence and heard both sides, and she's ready to make her recommendation to the court. Lance sits up straighter like he thinks this might go his way somehow. The mediator says she recommends primary physical custody to me with supervised visitation for Lance every other weekend. Lance starts to protest, but she holds up her hand and continues talking. The visitation is contingent on him completing parenting classes and individual therapy to address his priorities and behavior patterns. She adds that Gloria should have no contact with the children until they're older and can choose for themselves whether to have a relationship with her, based on the documented emotional harm her presence has caused. Lance's attorney writes this all down and then tells Lance quietly that he should accept this recommendation. Lance asks why he should accept anything, that he wants to fight this in court. His attorney explains that a judge will likely be even less sympathetic given the evidence, and that fighting this will cost him a lot of money, and probably result in an even worse outcome. The attorney says the words carefully like he's talking to a child who doesn't understand consequences. Lance looks at me across the table and his expression is pure anger, like I'm the villain in this situation instead of the person protecting our children from his selfish choices. The mediator asks if he's willing to sign the agreement or if he wants to proceed to trial. His attorney nudges him and Lance grabs the pen roughly, signing his name on the paperwork with hard strokes that nearly tear the paper. He glares at me the entire time and I meet his eyes without looking away because I have nothing to be ashamed of. The mediator collects the signed documents and tells us the court will review and finalize everything within the next few months. We all stand up and Lance storms out without saying anything to anyone. His attorney apologizes to the mediator and to Jillian before following his client out. Jillian packs up her documents and tells me this went exactly as well as we hoped. I feel relief wash over me but also exhaustion from holding myself together through the whole meeting. 3 months pass with paperwork and court filings, and finally the divorce is finalized with the custody arrangement exactly as the mediator recommended. I have primary custody, Lance has supervised visits twice a month, and he's required to pay child support that actually reflects his real income, now that the court examined his finances properly. The judge added the requirement that Gloria have no contact with the children, which is written into the official court order. I get the final papers in the mail and sit at my kitchen table reading through them, making sure everything is correct. 2 weeks after the custody agreement is finalized, Gwyneth calls me sounding excited about some gossip she heard. She tells me that Gloria broke up with Lance, apparently deciding that a man who lost his family for her, but then resented all the consequences wasn't worth the trouble. Gwyneth's friend saw Gloria at a restaurant with a different guy, some architect with no kids and no baggage. I try not to feel satisfied about this, but I completely fail, because the justice feels too perfect. Lance gave up his family for someone who didn't even want him once the reality set in. A few days later, I get an unexpected call from Oscar, Lance's boss at work. He apologizes for not realizing what Lance was doing during work hours, and how it affected our family. Oscar mentions that Lance's work performance has declined significantly over the past few months, and there have been multiple complaints about his unprofessional behavior with Gloria at company events. He says this carefully like he's trying to be diplomatic, but wants me to know that Lance's choices are catching up with him professionally too. I thank Oscar for calling and tell him I appreciate his concern for our family. 4 months after the separation, both kids are doing so much better. Mia is creating art again without anyone criticizing her work or throwing it away, and she even entered a school art competition that has her really excited. Jake made the select soccer team and plays with genuine joy instead of that anxious look he used to have when scanning the stands for his dad. They still have hard days when they miss having their father around properly, but the constant anxiety that used to fill our house is completely gone. Curtis tells me in our check-in meetings that both kids are making excellent progress in therapy and showing real resilience. Lance's supervised visits remain a problem because he cancels frequently, shows up late when he does come, and still seems more focused on his phone than on his children. The supervisor's reports document his ongoing failure to prioritize time with Jake and Mia, noting that he spends visits complaining about the divorce rather than engaging with them. Curtis mentions that the kids are increasingly ambivalent about seeing their father, asking less often when the next visit is, and showing less disappointment when Lance cancels. 2 months after that last visit report, my boss calls me into her office and tells me they're promoting me to senior coordinator with a 20% pay increase and better benefits. I sign the paperwork right there, already calculating in my head what this means for the kids. That weekend, I take Mia to the art supply store and let her pick out professional quality paints and brushes, the kind Gloria said she wasn't ready for. Jake gets new cleats, and we sign him up for the travel soccer team he's been wanting to try. We stop for ice cream after, and Gwyneth meets us there, taking one look at me and saying, I'm glowing now that the weight of that terrible marriage is off my shoulders. She's right. I feel lighter than I have in years, like I can finally breathe without that constant pressure in my chest. The kids are laughing over their Sundays, and I realize this is what normal feels like, what our lives should have been all along. 6 months after the divorce is finalized, we're having breakfast on a Saturday morning when Mia puts down her fork and tells me she's glad we left. She says now she can be herself without Gloria criticizing everything she does, without worrying that her artwork isn't good enough or sophisticated enough. Jake nods and adds that he likes our house better because it feels like home, not like some museum where he has to be quiet and careful all the time. I look at my kids sitting there in their pajamas with syrup on their faces and messy hair, completely relaxed and happy, and I realize they're genuinely okay for the first time since Gloria entered our lives. They still have moments where they miss having their dad around properly, but the constant fear and anxiety that used to fill every room is completely gone. 3 weeks later, Jillian calls me about paperwork from Lance's attorney. Lance is requesting modification of the custody arrangement to reduce his visitation time because maintaining the current schedule is too difficult for him. I read through the filing, and it's full of excuses about his work commitments and personal obligations. Nothing about what's best for the kids. Jillian handles it efficiently, filing our response that points out his pattern of canceled visits, and the supervisor reports documenting his lack of engagement. The court hearing takes 15 minutes. The judge reviews the evidence, looks at Lance with obvious disapproval, and reduces his visitation to once monthly. When I tell the kids that night, expecting sadness or disappointment, they just nod, and Jake asks if we can make popcorn and watch a movie. Their relief instead of sadness tells me everything I need to know about how they really feel about seeing their father. We're building a good life now. The 3 of us have dinner together every night at our small kitchen table. No Gloria redecorating our space or throwing out their artwork. I help with homework while they tell me about their day, really tell me without fear of being criticized or dismissed. We go to Jake's soccer games, and I'm the loudest parent in the stands, cheering every time he touches the ball. Mia's art is all over our fridge and walls, her drawings getting better as her confidence grows back. On weekends, we do things we actually enjoy instead of cultural enrichment we're supposed to appreciate. The kids are healing slowly but surely, laughing more and relaxing into just being children again. I'm stronger than I ever thought possible, capable of providing for them and protecting them in ways I didn't know I had in me. We're finally free from someone who proved over and over that he never deserved us in the first place, and every day that freedom feels more real and more right.